Welcome to the Turkish Energy Industry webinar organized by British Chamber of Commerce. My name is Emrah Öz, and I am the Chief Executive Officer for the British Chamber of Commerce, Turkey. In today's webinar, we will try to give you some insights on Turkish energy sector by covering different aspects and different subsectors of the industry as well. By considering Turkey's annual energy import from abroad and its strategic location as becoming one of the important corridors, energy corridors between Middle East and Europe, the energy industry offers lots of opportunities for the British businesses. Today, our aim is with BCCT member firm Deloitte is to brief you about where these opportunities are and how they can be unlocked for the British firms. Before we start and hand over to our energy expert from Deloitte team, I would like to give you brief information about British Chamber of Commerce and its structure in Turkey. British Chamber of Commerce, it's established on 1887. We are the second oldest British chamber overseas. We have very strong ties with Turkish marketing here, and we are the strategic delivery partner for Department for International Trade since 2013. On behalf of Department for International Trade, we carry out some B2B responsibilities that DIT Turkey carries. We have very wide business network in Turkey and UK through membership, strategic partnerships, and private sector contacts. And we, as I mentioned before, we are the service delivery partner for DIT, and we deliver B2B services to UK exporters and investors to Turkey as part of the Overseas Business Network Initiative of the Department for International Trade. British Chamber of Commerce in Turkey, we have 400 members from 28 different industries and over 13,000 business contacts from Turkey and the UK and within the region as well. And as BCCT, we have MOUs with local 14 biggest chambers in Turkey, which gives us access to reach 800,000 Turkish enterprises, which most of them are SMEs, and all these SMEs are keen to import or export bilaterally between Turkey and UK. And how BCCT assists you is basically the same structure with Department for International Trade. We give 3 hours free services. When your inquiry came to us from DIT or your direct approach to BCCT, we assist you on some issues like market access, market penetration, custom, legal, and accounting matters. We try to, assist your penetration into Turkish market. And if inquiry requires extension of, if it turns into a project like market information, meeting arrangement, trade delegation management, market research analyst, competitor analyst, business partner long list, market vision engagement, event management, long list of potential clients or companies, BCCT can also assist British firms to penetrate into the Turkish market with those services. If I need to briefly cover the bilateral trade between Turkey and the UK, we have an ongoing and continuous trade growth between two countries. Our current bilateral trade is nearly 17.7 billion pounds, which is in favor of Turkey when we look at the exports from each country. Turkey's export to UK exporting to Turkey is 6.5 billion pounds, and Turkey's export to the UK is 9.9 billion. Most of these imports from the UK are following sectors like electrical, non-electrical machines, metal ores and scrap, automotive, sub-industrial products, chemicals, material manufacturers. Energy is also playing a very important role in Turkey, in bilateral trade between Turkey and UK. We have Shell, BP, and lots of oil and gas suppliers, as well as solar manufacturers and solar panel producers in Turkey, as well as wind and other energy-related industries. Now I'll hand over to my colleague Elif Düşmeztek. She is the energy and resources partner, an industry leader from Deloitte. She's based in Ankara, so she's the expert on energy industry. She will be briefing you about Turkish industry.
Thank you, Emrah. This has been a very good introduction. Good morning, everybody. So as Emrah said, I'm working as a partner at Deloitte, and working on the energy and resources industry. It has been almost 20 years now in the sector. Before I joined Deloitte, I was working for one of the power utilities in Turkey, and then later it has been 15 years working exclusively for the energy and resources industry in Turkey with Deloitte. So I'd like to give you this presentation, this snapshot about the energy industry in Turkey. So I'll start with the primary energy consumption of Turkey, but then go into the power sector, the gas and the oil sectors. And I will try to identify or specify the areas of investments that could be interesting to you. So let's start with an overview of Turkey because there are lots of aspects or angles that really relate to energy and energy consumption in Turkey. First of all, Turkey's geopolitical position is quite important. It lies at the crossroads of Europe, Asia, Middle East, and Africa. And this is a location which is like, again, at the crossroads of big reserves and also consumption. Turkey itself is a big country, we can say, with a population of 82 million, and it's the 7th largest population among EMEA. Turkey is the 19th largest economy globally and the 13th largest according to purchase power. And it's the 6th largest European electricity market. But the thing is, it's a growing market. So the annual energy supply growth since 2002 is 4.3% on an annual basis. So this is really important because in most of the developed countries, energy consumption is not growing substantial. Therefore, it's important that Turkey still has a energy market where the supply or the demand is growing. And it has been one of the most interesting markets as it has also attracted investments substantially. As you can see also on the slide, between the years 2003 and 2018, the foreign direct investment has been $209 billion, so that's a big amount. And we will also discuss about, where these investments have been made and what is the prospect for the future. Okay. So in this slide, I'd like to talk about the primary energy consumption of Turkey and what are the basic characteristics of this primary energy consumption. First of all, if you look at the graph or the figure on the bottom left side of this slide, you can see the primary energy sources as well as the sectors which consume this energy. So basically, Turkey is using 31% of natural gas, 27% of coal, 30% of petroleum, and then 12% of its energy from renewables. So Turkey also has substantial sources of hydropower, wind power, and solar power. And this energy is used in different sectors, basically in residential and commercial, which accounts for 28%, followed by industrial, that's 24%, and electric power, and then transportation, and some very little part is for non-energy usage. So this is the basic sources and the basic use areas or the industries which consume this energy. One basic or important point is that Turkey is highly dependent on imports in supplying its energy because basically fossil fuel reserves of Turkey are highly limited. almost all natural gas is being imported. Most of the petroleum, we'll talk about the figures later on, is being imported. There's some local coal, and part of the coal is also being imported. But as the local source, we have some lignite and we have the renewables in Turkey. As you can see on the figure on the right top side, out of all the energy used, only 23% can be met by the local or the domestic resources. Other than that, coal, natural gas, and petroleum are being imported to Turkey. So that is one of the basic points which should be highlighted about Turkey. In the previous slides, we talked about the fact that energy consumption is increasing with the increasing population growth, industrialization, and urbanization. That's another point that should be highlighted about Turkey. But in addition to that, energy consumption per capita in Turkey is below average. If you can see on the figure on the right bottom side of this slide, which I think is quite important, you can see that energy consumption per capita is in terms of ton equivalent of energy is 1.82 in Turkey, whereas the OECD average is 4.10. So this means that there is room for energy consumption in Turkey to increase in terms of consumption per capita. Of course, there are energy efficiency related actions that are being taken not only in Turkey but also globally. That doesn't mean that Turkey will reach those averages. Most probably, the two will intersect somewhere between the two. So, what we need to highlight from this slide is that Turkey has limited local sources. Therefore, a majority of the energy consumed in Turkey is being imported. Turkey has an increasing energy consumption, and it has potential to go further due to growing population, industrialization, urbanization, as well as the need to increase energy consumption per capita. Okay, moving on to the next slide. Again, I would like to talk about the SWOT analysis of energy sector in Turkey, covering all the sub-sectors. First of all, talking about the strengths, we mentioned the geopolitical position of Turkey being located in between the very huge sources of energy and huge consumption of energy. Therefore, it's at the crossroads of these two angles. And again, the growing population, increasing industrialization and urbanization is also a strength where there is more and more energy needed. Turkey is also rich in renewable sources, so there is hydro sources, which is highly utilized indeed. But there's also wind, solar, and biogas, geothermal also, which needs to be used and exploited more. And again, on the strength side, there has been great progress that has been achieved in terms of liberalization of the energy market. We'll touch upon that. Maybe that's not at the same level for all subsectors. However, in all of the areas, there are good dynamics of the markets that are working. But in terms of weaknesses, we can mention the economic slowdown that we are experiencing in Turkey, starting from beginning of, let's say, 2019. So that's one of the weaknesses we are experiencing right now. And consequently, this affects a weakened demand for power sector, as well as the supply surplus that we are having again on the power sector right now. Another point is weak and volatile Turkish liras against US dollars and euros, because as we mentioned, most of the energy sources are being imported and they are linked to basically US dollars. And finally, we can say that there's still room to go in some areas of energy where there are more steps to be taken to reach a liberalized market. In terms of opportunities and threats, the basic opportunity area is the increasing energy demand. So there's no doubt that it's very attractive. It makes the market very attractive for the investors. And again, due to this low energy consumption per capita, this has potential to go further. The third point is quite important. Maybe we need to highlight that there is a very clear government policy for supporting local and renewable energy resources. So that's spoken aloud, that's supported in the market mechanism. So there's a clear energy policy that provides opportunities for the investors who would like to invest in those areas. Again, we'll get into the details of those. Another opportunity area is the government has increased efforts in exploration of oil and gas, because Turkey is not rich and there's imports and there's a will to decrease the energy imports. And also there's a need to expand and renew the energy infrastructure, because there was a period where there was lack of infrastructure investments in Turkey, let's say in power distribution, for example. And then there's a need to expand the infrastructure in some areas, let's say in natural gas distribution. So these are the areas where there are opportunities to invest from an investment point of view. But the threats are that, as you all well know, we are also in a politically in a region where there are political instabilities, and Turkey can be very adversely affected by those instabilities. So that's one of the threats. And there's high dependency on imports. This is, and due to the currency risks, this provides some threats to the investors that are active in Turkey. And again, there are some areas, as this is done in most of the countries, government can have some subsidies on end user prices, which can sometimes have adverse effect on functioning of the market mechanism. So this can be underlined as one of the threats that we face in energy sector in Turkey. So now I would like to get into the three subsectors, starting with the power, with electricity. So you can see the electricity value chain overview on the slide. The ones that are marked, you see generation, transmission, wholesale, distribution, and retail, and the ones that are marked in lighter blue are the segments of the supply chain that are competitive, and the other ones, which are namely transmission and distribution, are more regulated areas of the value chain. So on the generation side, there is an installed capacity of 88.6 gigawatts, and that corresponds to a generation of 305 terawatt hours of generation in Turkey. So in terms of, I mean, you can consider that generation is almost equal to consumption, with a difference that corresponds to the loss in the grid. But the generation has increased by 5% compound annual growth rate during the last 10 years. So this is really a very big number. We expect that the investments in the electricity generation will continue to grow, even though we are now going through an oversupply situation right now. And basically, when you look at the installed capacity, you can see that there's also a sort of a balance between the sources of electricity generation. Like the 30% is natural gas, whereas 32% is hydro, 22% coal, and there's a 16% of renewable energy. These are in terms of installed capacity. And renewable energy, by renewable energy we mean wind and solar, geothermal, and biomass. Of course, hydro with a percentage of 32 is also renewables, and that makes a good portion in terms of the installed capacity. On the transmission side, it's owned by a single company, by a government-owned entity. And the transmission grid is a big one. It's the fourth longest transmission line among Europe. As the generation and consumption increase, also the transmission grid also requires investment, and these investments are being realized year by year. On the wholesale side, indeed, there are organized power markets, as well as there's bilateral trade, and the total traded volume is 405 terawatt-hours, greater than the generation capacity or generated electricity. As I said, there are marketplaces like the spot market, the day-ahead market, and there are also bilateral agreements. And the trade volume in Turkey has grown 7.4% in an annual basis since 2012. So that's also a remarkable number in terms of improving energy trade. On the distribution side, the distribution of electricity is totally privatized. So there are 21 electricity distribution companies, but they are being regulated by the energy regulator. And substantial investments are being made in that area, because Turkey's infrastructure before those privatizations required investments, and that was lacking. And privatizations and handovers to private sector started in 2008, and it was completed in 2013. And starting from that period until now, high levels of investments are being done in that area. And on the retail side, it is one of the most attractive parts of the value chain, we can say. With a population that's growing, the power consumption is also growing. And so it is a very attractive area in terms of energy sales. Okay, so after this overview, let's move into the next slide, where I would like to talk about the progress that has been achieved from several angles in the electricity market. So first of all, in terms of demand, electricity gross demand has increased from 198, let's say 20 terawatt hours in 2008 to 300 terawatt hours at the end of 2018. That corresponds to a compounded annual growth rate of 4.4%. And on the supply side, the installed capacity increased. It more than doubled in the last decade. So this corresponds to an installed capacity increase of 4,670 megawatts each year. So that's really enormous. And at the end of 2018, we reached an installed capacity of 88,500 megawatts. So it's not only improvement in terms of supply security, but also supply diversity, because the investments wasn't made in only one area, but it attracted investments in, let's say, in coal, natural gas, especially in natural gas, and in also renewables. So that's quite an achievement in terms of supply security and supply diversity. And from the ownership point of view, currently 67% of installed capacity is privately owned, and it's increasing indeed. All power distribution is privatized, and an amount of $13 billion of privatization income was achieved. And 4 billion Turkish lira of network investment per year has been realized in the last 8 years to improve electricity supply quality. So what we can say is that from the ownership point of view, this success in increasing installed capacity has been mostly achieved by the private sector. It really attracted investments in power generation area as well as in power distribution. And on the market side, of course, all this private sector investment has been achieved by means of establishing organized markets. This was a progressive improvement because you need to also improve the infrastructure to get the market functioning. But on a year-by-year basis, new marketplaces have been introduced, and the trade environment has progressed and improved steadily. And with this improvement, significant level of private sector investment have been attracted into Turkey. And on the when you look at the retail side, so again on a progressive improvement, the eligible customer limit has been decreased. This means the customers that are free to choose their supplier. And as of 2018, last resort tariff has been introduced, and a social tariff is now in place. And more or less, everything is in place in terms of a well-functioning electricity market. However, as we can see in this next slide, currently the electricity market is going through difficult times, and some of the electricity generators are facing financial sustainability issues. I would like to mention that also because this also provides an opportunity on the investment end. First of all, the pace of power demand growth has slowed because of the economic downturn that we are going through right now in Turkey. And due to the decrease in the oil prices after 2014, power prices also dropped, and they were not supportive of the power price projections that were in the feasibility of those investments. And the amount of investments that we mentioned due to this increasing installed capacity was over $100 billion. And the outstanding debt that needs to be paid is now $47 billion. And due to the significant depreciation of TL against US dollar and euro, the investments are now faced with the difficulty of paying these debts back. And in addition to these adverse conditions, I should say, there's also supply surplus because of all these investments that were attracted. And there's very hard competition against the generators to meet the demand. And the spreads, the spark spreads for CCGTs doesn't support the payback requirements that we talked about before, that they need to, they make investments in hard currencies, and this money has to be paid back to the banks. And due to those difficulties, a capacity mechanism has been introduced in the electricity market, but currently the amount of money that is provided to support is not enough to cover the debts. Therefore, there's an ongoing restructuring of $13 billion of debt on the generation and the electricity distribution side. But this is progressing. This is an issue that Turkey has been facing, let's say, in the last year, during 2019, and we now hear that those debts are being restructured by the banks in Turkey. So I'd like to increase my speed a bit so that we can cover all the material here. So coming to the investment opportunities in electricity, I would like to mention 4 areas. So the brownfield is really about all those energy companies, especially the electricity companies that have that financial difficulty. So there are highly leveraged holding companies facing financial difficulties, looking for potential partnerships, or could be open to discuss those. There are leading holding companies who may consider to divest their energy portfolio, or some of them may sell a minority or majority stakes to a potential investment. And some of the international energy firms in Turkey may consider disposing their assets in Turkey, so that it constitutes the brownfield area or investment opportunity in electricity. The renewable energy side, I think, is the most prominent one. There's a feed-in tariff scheme in Turkey, but we have come to the end of this scheme, and this scheme has helped increase the investments in renewable energy in Turkey. And it also has an upside with use of local component. Therefore, it supports usage of local investments in component production. So what is important here is the scheme that will replace the feed-in tariff scheme. So we are all looking forward to learn what will be the new scheme. As the unit investment cost of renewable energy, solar and wind, is decreasing, the feed-in tariff is also expected to decrease. Maybe there won't be such feed-in tariff for some of those technologies, but we will have them for some of them. So we'll see. This scheme is coming to its end, and we are expecting to hear about the new scheme soon. So it's an area that needs to be followed closely. And on the smart grid side, I talked about the fact that all the distribution grid has been privatized, and there's been substantial investments on the grid side as well as on management of the grid, which corresponds to smart grid investments. This is also another area which should attract attention. So the next tariff period will start as of beginning of 2021. And during these times, I mean during 2019 and 2020, the investors are discussing their tariffs with the regulators, and it will be fixed as end of 2020 to start 2021. Therefore, it will be important to understand how much budget is being put in the tariffs of these companies, what are their plans that they have discussed with the regulators, and how they will realize that. So this is another prominent and important area that should be followed in details in the coming periods for smart grid investments. Finally, privatizations. There's still some portfolio by the government that needs to be privatized, but Actually, maybe the small hydro portfolio could be interesting, but other than that, as local source, government wants to privatize the coal mines together with the right to build power plants, coal-fired power plants, but it's not easy to attract investment and financing in this period where there's shift towards carbon dioxide emission reduction and also shift towards renewable energy. So that's not maybe as doable as the other areas. So that was about the electricity. Now I'd like to move quickly into natural gas value chain. So again, this is an area where almost all natural gas in Turkey is being imported, and the main imports are from Russia, Iran, and Azerbaijan through pipelines, and Algeria, Nigeria, Qatar, and other LNG exporting countries in terms of LNG. So Turkey gets natural gas both from pipelines and from in the form of LNG. And 80% of this gas is being brought in by BOTAŞ. BOTAŞ is the publicly owned company, the incumbent supplier in Turkey. That's also vertically integrated, meaning that it imports gas, transmits gas, and can sell gas at its end-use level. In terms of the transmission system, it's again a huge system, and it's getting more investment as gas usage is increasing in Turkey. In terms of LNG and storage, there are 4 LNG and FSRU terminals in Turkey. 2 are LNG and 2 are FSRU. And there are 2 active underground storage facilities in Turkey. But the thing is, both in LNG, FSRU, and underground storage, there's a need to introduce more capacity to the system. On the wholesale side, we can basically see BOTAŞ, the incumbent suppliers, and also other suppliers with lower volumes, and basically dominated by BOTAŞ. On the distribution and retail side, again, other than only one distribution region corresponding to Istanbul area, again, all distribution regions have been privatized, and there has been a very successful greenfield natural gas distribution tendering period, where as a greenfield investment opportunity that was provided to the investors, and that has been well accepted by the investors, and it has been successfully implemented. And we also had international investors at that, and EWE, for example, they have very recently sold their assets to SOCAR, and GDF. We have GDF in the natural gas distribution in Turkey. So it's again expanding within Turkey, and it's a good area for also further investment. I would like to mention opportunities in natural gas. So we can talk about spot gas import via pipelines or via LNG. Via pipelines, it has not been, this was not an area of investment or opportunity in Turkey for all the investors, but quite recently there has been a new introduction in the regulation by the Energy Market Regulatory Authority that allows spot gas imports via pipelines. This is linked with Turkish Stream pipeline becoming online, and as the Turkish Stream pipeline becomes online, the Westline pipeline will be available for such trading activities in both ways. And for that to happen, we need to have interconnection agreements signed with Greece and Bulgaria, and that we know that the transmission companies working hard to accomplish that. So this is not maybe an opportunity for right today, but it's an area for the ones who's interested in getting engaged in spot gas trading via pipelines. And again, as for LNG, this is sure possible, and with the as Turkey's 80% of gas demand is met by oil-linked contracted imports, and as you might guess, this is very the price level is higher than compared to the LNG prices that is getting lower and lower nowadays. Therefore, this provides a good area for gas imports via LNG. But there are some issues with regards to third-party access, and they are again being worked on by the regulatory authority. But in paper, it's possible to it's possible for private sector investors or traders to bring in natural gas to Turkey via LNG terminals. And on the gas distribution side, as I already mentioned, there are 8 entities with natural gas supply, and there is a demand to provide gas to even smaller cities. There's a will to do that, and whenever it is financially feasible, this is also supported by the regulator. Therefore, we expect that penetration of natural gas distribution network throughout Turkey will continue. And we also hear that smart grid investments will be introduced to the natural gas grid as well. So this is also another area that needs to be looked at by the related investors. Another area is small-scale CNG, LNG trading. This is for the areas where it's not technical, that's not financially feasible to lay pipes to bring gas. As gas is being used extensively in Turkey, and wherever you cannot take gas through pipes, you have the opportunity to take it in terms of CNG and LNG. So that's another area that's active in Turkey. So these are the areas that we can identify in terms of opportunities in natural gas. However, it should also be mentioned that there is this incumbent supplier that can impose subsidies that also affect the trading activities in Turkey. Therefore, one should clearly understand the dynamics here locally to get engaged in activities in natural gas trading. And next, I would like to talk about the oil value chain. The oil value chain is really an area which is the least regulated, let me say, compared to electricity and natural gas I mentioned before. But let me talk about the upstream, midstream, and downstream one by one. So on the upstream side, there is again imports. As you can see on the slide, crude oil imports in 21 million tons on a yearly basis, whereas 2.5 million tons are only produced within Turkey. So again, we have dependence on imports to meet Turkey's oil demand. And there are 4 pipelines. 2 are international. One is bringing crude oil to Turkey from Azerbaijan through Georgia, and the other one is bringing crude oil to Turkey from Iraq. And 2 of them are working within Turkey. So in terms of midstream, we can talk about these pipelines. But in terms of downstream, there are areas where we should mention that. First of all, there are refineries. Turkey is quite powerful in terms of processing oil and producing value-added products. So that's one area that Turkey is strong at. And another area is, of course, the retail side. When we talk about retail in Turkey, Turkey is always quite good in terms, not only in energy, in other segments in retail. And so with its growing economy, it's a very good retail market for oil downstream. And several prominent oil distribution companies, BP, Shell, are also active in Turkey for many years indeed. And finally, investment opportunities in terms of oil. First of all, again, on the downstream side of the business, you can see foreign investors and you can see ongoing M&A activities. BP and Shell has been here for many years. Petrol Ofisi, PO, as you can see on the slide, is a local company, but it was then later on taken over by OMV. And last year OMV exited Turkey and sold Petrol Ofisi to Vitol Group. Now Vitol Group is active in Turkey. SOCAR is again very active in both processing of oil and they're also interested in the downstream side of the business. Star Refinery was commissioned very recently, and the total investment amount was $6.3 billion. Star Refinery was built by SOCAR in Turkey. And as you can see on the logos here, international companies, you can see that they are active in Turkey as the retail market is very attractive. We can talk about, as another area, the LPG consumption. In Turkey, due to the, taxation, LPG is, or let's say gasoline in automobiles is used as least compared to diesel and LPG. LPG is currently 33, let's say almost 40% of the automobiles by fuel type. And so it's a commonly used fuel in motor vehicles. So this is an area which is interesting for the investors. And finally, we can talk about on the upstream side, the government is now very active in trying to find oil and natural gas sources. And it's being spoken a lot, especially by the government officials, that it will be possible in Turkey to produce crude oil using hydraulic fracturing methods in the southeastern part of Turkey, but it's not yet early to say, you know, if that will really realize in Turkey or not. So that's in a snapshot. I'm trying to go fast to save some time for some questions and answers. I think we have at least, let's say, something like more than 5 minutes or so. And finally, I would like to finish my words by advising you to visit Invest in Turkish Energy website of the Energy Market Regulatory Authority. Turkish energy market has attracted both local and international investment for several years, but due to the issues and problems that I mentioned before, due to the economic downturn that we're experiencing right now, this attraction sort of slowed down. Therefore, in order to again tell the international investors about the Turkish energy Market Regulatory Authority has, put a lot of effort and has built this website. You can visit the website and you can find a lot of useful information about how the market function is functioning right now, as well as opportunities to invest in those areas. It's very informative. So you can see the list here, but it's not the whole list. You can find more information on EMRA's website, and I hope this information will complement what we have gone through so far. So if you let me, I would like to have a look at the questions. I can now see 2 questions here. If you want to have more, please go ahead and ask. So one is asking about the energy lead of Chamber of Commerce. That can be answered by BCCT probably. But the other question is, are there only 5 refineries in Turkey? Yes, indeed, that's so. And these refineries belong to 2 investors. One is a local one, Koç Holding is the biggest holding company in Turkey, and the other one belongs to SOCAR. SOCAR is the government-owned big energy company of Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is investing a lot in Turkey, especially in the oil sector. And in this slide that I opened right now, you can also see the processing capacities of those refineries. So if there are more questions, we still have some time. I'll be more than happy to answer them. And if not, probably address later on.
Elif, thank you very much. Very useful indeed, touching different, various elements of the subject. We have another question came from Prismoni. Can we get the contact details of energy lead of the chamber? Yes, you can contact to me, and I can direct you to the right person in my office. Do we have any other question? Otherwise, I will hand it out to Corinne.
I can't see the questions, but just as a reminder, you can type them in the Q&A box, which should be on the right-hand side of your screen. If that isn't visible yet, you can click on the 3 dots icon at the bottom of the screen and select Q&A. Just while we wait to see if there are any more questions, a very quick one from me. When you leave the session today, you'll receive a feedback survey. We really appreciate it if you can provide some feedback there, as it helps these sessions going forward. I can't see any more questions there, so I don't know if you guys have got any final words or whether or not we should end it there for today.
No, thank you very much, Corinne. As British Chamber of Commerce, we are eager to hear back from British firms who are looking to invest or export in Turkey, especially for the energy industry. We have another question came across asking for presentations of the email. I think you will be sharing the PowerPoints of this session with the participants. If not, you can reach the entire audio session together with PowerPoint slides from BCCT website within the next couple of days.
Yeah, exactly that. I think on that note, we'll close it down for today. So again, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.